All right, good evening. We are on Daf Mem Beis Amud Aleph, 42a, probably three or four. Four. Good. Four lines from the bottom. Esvei. We were having a discussion between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan felt that if an idol breaks of its own accord, the pieces of that idol are still prohibited. The logic being that the only way for an idol to lose its prohibitedness is for a non-Jew to nullify it. If the non-Jew broke the idol, then that's clear that he's nullifying. He doesn't pay attention to that idol anymore. But if the idol just breaks by himself, that doesn't necessarily mean he's nullifying the idol, and Rabbi Yochanan feels that he doesn't. Reish Lakish feels that if the idol is broken, then the non-Jew has the logic, if this idol couldn't protect himself, how's he going to protect me? Therefore, he nullifies the idol, and he says that the idol is no longer an idol, and then all the pieces are permitted. So we've had a series, what we did for the end of last year, for the last like 5 or 6 questions or so, that Rabbi Yochanan was asking Reish Lakish. Here's all of these circumstances. We find the pieces of an idol to be prohibited, and how do you explain that? And the last several that we answered was that it's potentially because the idol could have potentially become connected to a Jew. And then we learned the new rule that a idol that belongs to a Jew can never be desanctified or decommissioned as an idol, right? It stays an idol forever. So therefore, we don't want Jews. Once Jews start to pick it up, that ruins the whole thing. That was Rava's shita, and then therefore we had all kinds of situations where if a Jew breaks the idol, doesn't that indicate that it's the same thing as the idol breaking by itself? And we decided no, not necessarily so, and that was the basic back and forth that we've been discussing. We've got one more question that Rabbi Yochanan is going to ask Reish Lakish, and then we're going to switch and go. Reish Lakish is going to ask Rabbi Yochanan a couple of questions. So here we go. Esvei. So we ask the following question. Rabbi Yossi says, Aflo Yerokos bimos hageshamim mipnei she ha nivaya nosheres aleim. He says that if you're not allowed to plant vegetables under an Asherah tree. So an Asherah tree was a tree that was worshipped as an idol, and you can't plant underneath that tree for vegetables because the shade is going to the branches of the tree are going to provide protection for those vegetables during the winter months. And you're not allowed to get any benefit from the Asherah tree. So now, um, um, 1 second. And also because, right, I should mention also because the leaves are going to fall from the tree, and the leaves are going to become fertilizer, like mulch, for the growing vegetables underneath. That was the important part of it. So why should there be a problem with getting any benefit from the leaves of the Asherah tree? After all, let us say that the pieces of the Asherah tree that fell off, i.e., the leaves, are similar to pieces of an idol that broke off by themselves. And Reish Lakish said that those should be permissible. So Rabbi Yochanan says, you see, I'm right. The fact that you can't get benefit from the falling leaves of an Asherah tree indicates that pieces of an idol that fall off are not are pieces of an Asherah tree that fall off are prohibited, like Rabbi Yochanan says. Okay, so Shani Hasam. So Reish Lakish answers, no, it's different over there. Deikar avodos kochavim kayemes. The difference is that the Avodah Zara, the tree itself, still is in existence. When we're talking about breaking off the idol breaks by itself. We've been talking about a circumstance where, I don't know, let's say the idol falls over and smashes. And now the question is whether the pieces that remain, whether the idol has been deconsecrated. In a circumstance where the idol itself still remains, for sure the non-Jew doesn't deconsecrate the idol, right? It's still there. Okay. But the ha shipuyon de ikravos kom kayemes. What about the circumstance that there are twigs that you break off from a tree of idolatry, right? And you're not allowed to use those. But the tree still exists. The Ketani, and we learned before when we talked about breaking off for those, litzorcha hi asura. If you break it off, if you break the branches off for the sake of the tree, So then they are prohibited. Veshipuya mutorin, right? But the branches, the pieces, the twigs, the tree itself is prohibited still because you're not breaking it off in order to nullify, you're just breaking it off in order to help the tree. And the twigs themselves are permitted because you just pruned the tree and everything you remove from the tree is no longer part of the tree. And so those things become permissible because the non-Jew is pruning it and removing it from the idolatry. So Rav Huna, brother of Yeshua Amar, Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua, he explains it as follows: You know what the thing is? The normal way for a tree to grow is for it to lose its leaves. Therefore, if losing its leaves happens, you can't say that's a nullification of the tree. That's the normal way that it grows. So therefore, that's why this is different, right? So therefore, the whereas in normal circumstances, the pieces that break off would be permissible. In this circumstance, they're not, because that's the normal life cycle and the life process of the tree. Therefore, even the leaves and everything that falls off are likewise prohibited. Okay, so that's the last question of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Now let's flip the script. Esvei Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish le Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish is going to ask Rabbi Yochanan questions. And here we're going to try to prove that the pieces of the idol that break by itself are permissible, right? Rabbi Yochanan says they're prohibited. We're going to try to prove that they are permissible. Kan shebarosha ilon. Let's say you've got an Asherah tree and you've got a nest, a bird's nest, in the top of that tree. Shel hektish, I'm sorry, this is not an Asherah tree. This is shel hektish, lo nanin velo moalin. Berosh, so he says, if you've got this nest and it's in a second, Yehuda got out, so I got to put him back in. Okay. If got distracted, sorry about that. So if the tree is hektish, the tree is sanctified for the Beis Hamikdash, it's kodesh, so then you can't get benefit from that nest. But if you do, you have not violated a prohibition of me'ila. Me'ila is the prohibition against making use of anything that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. Now, that seems to be like, it doesn't make sense because either it should be permissible and then it's 100% permissible, or if you're going to say it's prohibited from getting benefit from it, so then it should be me'ila. That's the reason why it's prohibited. So the Gemara is going to explain why that would work. Berosha shel Asherah. Now, if this nest is on the top of the Asherah tree, that's the other case, right? The nest is on the top of the Asherah tree. Yatiz bikana. You can shake the branches. You can hit it with a stick, right? You can hit it with a stick and get the nest down, and then you can use the nest, right? Presumption the Gemara is making at this point is that the nest itself is what you're trying to use. What's a nest made out of? A nest is made out of twigs. Where do twigs come from? The tree that it's in. So therefore, you've got a nest that's made out of a Asherah tree wood, and yet it's completely permissible to use. That supports Reish Lakish, and that's a question against Rabbi Yochanan. So kasalka daitach. So you might have thought kigon sheshavra mimenu eitzim vekinsa bahen. Right. That what happened is that the nest was made from little twigs that the birds broke off from the Asherah tree. V'katani, and it says yatiz bekana. You can just hit it with a stick, knock it down, and you could use it. So hachabamayaskina. What's going on here? Kigon da'isi eitzim me alma. This is Rabbi Yochanan's answer is. It's not the branches that the twigs are from this nest are not from this tree. The twigs from this nest are from other trees. The bird brought twigs from other trees and then brought them over. V'kinsa bahen, and made a nest out of them. Daikanami, and I can for sure know that that's the case here because Dikatani Gabi Hektish, the first part was talking about the Hektish case. And the Hektish case, we said, it didn't make sense. How do you have a prohibition that says you're not allowed to get benefit from it, but then it's not me'ila? I mean, the whole prohibition is me'ila. So lo nen and velo mo'ilin, how do you have that? Iamar bishlama, so if you're going to say, fine, da'isi eitzim these pieces of wood don't even come from this tree. So hainu dikatani gabe hektish lo nen and velo mo'ilin. Well, then now we have a reason, a rationale, why it would be that this nest would be prohibited to use, but it wouldn't be me'ila. How come? Lo nanin midrabanan. Why? Rabbinically, they're going to establish don't use this nest. Why? Because it's too close to using the piece of the tree itself. You're right, this wood didn't come from the tree, but other nests might come from this tree. Or that you might think that I can break a branch off this tree and use it because I can break a nest out of the tree and use it. Therefore, the Rabbanan said, don't use it. However, v'lo mo'ilin midoraisa, it's not a prohibition of me'ila from a Torah perspective because it's not hektish. These pieces of wood came from another tree that had nothing to do with this tree. So now that makes sense. Deha lo kedishi, these pieces of this twigs from this nest are not sanctified. Ella, however, if the twigs of the tree, if the twigs from this nest actually came from the tree itself, so v'kinsa bahen, and the nest was made with those, why would you not be liable for the prohibition of me'ila using a consecrated item if you used the nest, which has twigs from the tree that's hektish? Ha-kadishi, the twigs are hektish, the twigs are holy. So midi area, he says, well, one second, what exactly are we dealing here? That's not a proof. Here, we're talking about the tree was declared hektish, and then little branches sprouted after that. And we hold that any little branch that sprouts after the tree's already declared hektish, those new branches are not hektish. The tree is declared hektish as is, as stands. We're going to discuss this when we get into our next Seder of Kodshim. But the tree itself is declared hektish as is. All the new growth is not hektish. So therefore, because savar ein me'ila begidulin, therefore there's no me'ila by the additional new branches. So when the bird makes a nest with all of these new branches, it's not hektish. And that's why it's now when it comes to Avodah Zara, so all the tree is worshipped, right? So therefore, these branches should still be prohibited. And nevertheless, we see you're allowed to use them. Reish Lakish's answer is back in place. It's a good answer. Rabbi Yochanan, Mayatiz. So now Rabbi Avodah says that he's going to explain Rabbi Yochanan's answer. He says, what does it mean that you're supposed to take a stick and you're going to use the nest? Yatiz be'efrochin. You're trying to get the eggs out of the nest. The nest itself, according to Rabbi Yochanan, is prohibited. Rabbi Lakish is saying the nest is fine because even though it came from the Ashir tree, it's pieces that broke off. It's fine. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, it's not fine. The nest is no good. But what are you trying to get at? You're trying to get at the eggs. Amalei Rabbi Yaakov, the Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa. So Rabbi Yaakov said to Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa, Asabra loch be'efrochin, I'm sorry, efrochin are not the eggs. Efrochin are chicks, right? The little chicks, the little birds, right? So he says it has to be the little birds that you're trying to get, not the nest. He says, I will explain to you very clearly it has to be the little birds, right? Kan bekan mutarin, bebeitzin, kan bekan asurin. He says that when it comes to the birds, when it comes to hektish, and when it comes to the Asherah tree, those are permissible to use. But when it comes to eggs, the eggs would be prohibited to use. Can't use the eggs. Why? Because the eggs rest on the nest, which rests on the tree. The tree is there for support. And therefore, since the tree is there to hold up the eggs need the tree. They're getting benefit. Those eggs exist because of the tree. Therefore, if you use the eggs, you're getting benefit from the tree. So therefore, that would be a problem both from a Me'ila perspective and from a Avodah Zarah perspective. Amaravashi, by the way, if you have chicks that still need their mother, they can't fly yet. So then those are also like eggs. Those don't move. It has to be chicks that live in the nest, but are able to get up and leave the nest. They're not reliant on the tree at this point. Yes, Yehuda.
Does that make those eggs not kosher at all?
It doesn't make them not kosher, but it makes them prohibited to get any benefit from. Right? Now, in practice, if you mean by not kosher, you mean that you can't eat them, that is true. Right? But if it means that they're not kosher, meaning is this a kosher egg? Yeah, it's a kosher egg, right? It just means that there are some kosher eggs that you can't eat. And that's what's going on here. This egg becomes me'ila. Now, if it's me'ila, for example, you could eat it if you buy it from the Beis Hamikdash, right? You can deconsecrate things by purchasing them from the Beis Hamikdash, right? Asherah, you could also make it acceptable to eat if a non-Jew would deconsecrate it. So it's only prohibited in its current state. Doesn't have to stay that way. Okay. Next Mishnah. Hamotzi kelim, if you find a utensil, the aleim tzuras chama, tzuras levana, tzuras dragon. I have to pronounce it right. I said darkon, but it's really a dracon because a serpent, right? And on this utensil is an image of the sun, the moon, or a dragon. So yolichem liyam melech, you got to throw those utensils into the Red Sea, right? Into the no, Dead Sea, right? The Dead Sea. That's where the Yam Melech is. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, what and why? Because those images were worshipped. And so therefore, if you've got a utensil with those images on it, then this was an Avodah Zara piece. You got to destroy it. Can't keep it around. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, She'al ha-mechubadin asurin, if it's on a special utensil, a significant utensil, then yes, that it could be worshipped. She'al ha-mevuzin mutarn, but a disgraced utensil, a lower level utensil, not so, right? That depends. And we're going to see what the definition of a honored utensil versus a low level utensil is. And if you had it on a low level utensil, then they were just decorating it. Decorations are fine. It's only things that got worshipped that are not fine. Says the Gemara. Lememra de lahanihu de palchi lehu lemidi achrina lo. So he says, that means that you can learn from this Mishnah that it's only these three items that non-Jews worship, right? They worship the sun, the moon, and they staff is a low utensil. Let's hang on, Yuda. You'll see when we get to that. We'll see where they are, right? They don't worship other things. So maybe other images that are engraved on utensils might also be worshipped. Vehatanya, Uramini, sorry, we have a contradiction. Hashochit l'shum yomim, if the non-Jews, they would slaughter an animal for the sake of worshiping the sea. L'shum naros, or rivers. L'shum midbar, or the deserts. L'shum chama, for the sun. L'shum levana, for the moon. L'shum kochabim, for the stars. Mazolos, and for the planets. L'shum Michael sar hagadol, they would worship Michael, the great angel Michael. L'shum shilshul kotan, they would worship a little small worm. So hare elu zivche mesim, as long as they sacrifice to any of those things, the sacrifice becomes idolatry. It's zivche mesim, and it has all the prohibitions against getting any benefit. So that means that it seems that idolaters will worship anything. So why specifically these items? So Amar Abaye, so Abaye says miflach lekol demishkachi palchi meitzar umefalchi. So he says, the non-Jews, they will find anything, and I'm sorry, one second. Okay, good, thanks. They will find anything, and they will and they will worship it. So they'll see a river and they go, "That's a beautiful river. Time to worship it." Right? They'll find a mountain, they'll worship it. Right? But these things they will they will craft specifically for the sake of idolatry, right? So therefore, it's only these three that have that status, right? They'll make a dragon and say, "This is my idol, I will worship it." But a sun, a moon, and a dragon. But other things, right? They're otherwise they just any designs that they make for decoration purposes. So if you go to the store and you find a utensil with decorations on it, it's only decorations. The only time they make those things as idols is when they have those things. So in practice, for halacha, probably not nowadays, right? It winds up being one of these circumstances where if you've got these kinds of things, they're not made for worship, right? They are made they're made for decoration, right? If you have, I think when my kids were growing up, one of them had the cow jump over the moon on their plate, right? And so if you had this moon on the plate, now what it wasn't engraved, or it wasn't a 3D image, right? It wasn't, but nevertheless, even if it was a 3D image, it was made for decoration. It was certainly not made for worship. So therefore, potentially not a problem, right? However, we're going to see why it might be a problem. We're going to see that in the Gemara coming up, it may be an issue. right? That there's a separate issue when it comes to the sun, stars, and things that besides it being worshipped. So we'll hang on to that. Um, okay, so now, um, so lemidi achrini for other things, lenoi b'alma avdi, they make them for decoration purposes. We are on 42b 3. Is that correct? 42b3. We are at Mankit Rav Sheshes. So Rav Sheshes, Menakit Rav Sheshes Chumrei Masniyaso. So Rav Sheshes was collecting very difficult brisos. That was a hobby of his, right? We all have the things that we do. He liked to find all the difficult brisos together, and he would gather them together, try to provide some kind of explanation behind them. Vitani, and he learned like this: Kol mazonos mutorin. All of the planets are permissible. Chutz mi mazal, all the planets are celestial bodies, right? You're allowed to make celestial bodies of any type. Chutz mi mazal chama ulavana, except for the sun and the moon. V'chol ha-partzufin mutorin, and also any human features, any faces of human beings are allowed. Chutz mi pertzuf adam, except for, sorry, any creature, right? You can make the face of any creature except for a human. Cannot make a face of a human. V'chol atzuros mutaros chutz mitzuros drakon, and any earthly bodies are permissible except for the dragon, right? Can't make the dragon. So Amar Mar. So Mar says, Kol mazalos mutarin chutz mimazol chama ulavana. Let's start off with this. We say that all of the constellations, all of the stars, planets, so you can make any of them except for sun and the moon. Hachab, what are we dealing with here? Ilema ba'osa. If we're talking about, the question is, can you make them? Okay, because this is going to be the difference between making them and owning them, right? Because making them is going to be one prohibition. Owning them is going to be a prohibition of owning Avodah Zara. So are we talking about the prohibition here in this brisa of making them? Or are we talking about the prohibition of owning them? So ibeosa, if you're talking about making them, kol mazos mishari, then everything, any celestial body, is prohibited to be made. V'haksiv, because the pasuk says, lo sasun iti, right? Don't make anything that is with me, meaning Hashem lives in Shemayim. You cannot make any three-dimensional figures of celestial bodies. Lo sa'asun kidmus shamshi hamishamshim lifanai b'maro. You cannot make any of my servants who serve me in the heavens. So that's going to apply to any stars, planets, three-dimensional representations is my understanding. Stars, planets, sun, moon, any angels, right? Those things you cannot make. So I had a fourth grade project. I think I had mentioned this at one previous Daf Yomi, perhaps. Fourth grade project. They made three-dimensional models of the planets, and we were told take them down, right? Shouldn't. Now, take them down. Once we have them, it seems, probably isn't prohibited. Having the fourth graders make them was probably the only issue, right? Owning a globe might not be a problem. Making a globe might be a problem, right? That's what it sounds like to me, right? Except I don't know whether the Earth is a celestial body, right? So these are questions to be able to find out and look up, right? But let's say I had one of those models of the moon, right? I had a globe of the moon, right? So that would be problematic if I made it. El pshita b'motze. So really, we must be talking about he found it, right? This person found it in the store. Okay, so now he finds a model of the solar system in the store. Ukinitznan, like we learned in a Mishnah. Hamotzi kalim va'alehem tzuras chamul tzuras levana tzuras drakon. So it says clearly, our Mishnah, right, that even if you find utensils with these items on them, you cannot keep these utensils. They have to be destroyed, because even owning these items, it's not a matter of making them, it's a matter of owning them because they're worshipped. So that's a different issue. Sun, moon, out of the question, cannot have those. Yolicham liyam melch, you got to throw them into the Dead Sea. Even motze, so then fine. So now we're telling you this brisa is talking about finding items, right? And so this brisa is telling you if you find three-dimensional objects, you're allowed to find anything, just not suns and moons That's the issue. And then comes the next thing. The middle thing that the Brisa said was, Kol ar partsufos mutarin chutz mi partsuf adam. I'm allowed to have the face of anything, right? I can have a deer head on my wall, right, as a trophy, hunting trophy, but I cannot have the face of a person. No, I'm not saying like a trophy for, right, a trophy of a person hanging on my wall, but I mean, right, cannot have a right my bust of Mozart sitting on my piano, right? Would be a problem. So now, and we're saying it's bemotze. I found it. I didn't have to make it. Making it's not this is the prohibition. Even having one is a problem. I bemotze pirtzuf adam mi aser. What do you mean? Having a three-dimensional face of a person is prohibited? V'atznan, we learned in a Mishnah. Hamotzi kelim v'aleim tzuras chama tzuras levana tzuras drakon. The Mishnah says the only things that you can't have on a utensil is the sun, the moon, and the dragon. Yolich miyam melch. Tzuras drakon in pertuf adam lo. You only have to throw the dragons into the ocean. You don't have to throw the people into the ocean. Therefore, there's no problem owning a bust of a person. Not an issue. Ella pshita be'ose. It must be that the problem is only making a three-dimensional sculpture of a person. Making a three-dimensional sculpture person is a problem, not owning one, right? So ukid Rav Huna, brei de Rav Yeshua. It's like Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua, said. I be'ose. So now, okay, so now we're back to in the middle. We've decided we are talking about making the face, making the three-dimensional face. Now, let's go to the third stage of the brisa. This is why it was one of the difficult ones. The third stage of the brisa said, okay, now we're talking in the brisa about making it. So let's go to the third part. The third part says, Ema Seifa, Kol Tzuras Mutoros. We're allowed to make any faces or heads of things, Chutz Mitzuras Drakum, except for the dragon. Now, Viba Osa, if you're talking about making it, so Tzuras Drakum mi aser, who says that making a dragon is prohibited? V'haksiv, the pasuk says, Lo sasuni ti Elohei chasef Elohei zahav. You're not allowed to make the celestial bodies as gods, right? Any animal, a dragon, is not a celestial body. It can be made. It's only owning one that's a problem because, or having it around is a problem because it would be worshipped. But if you make it, shouldn't be a problem. So therefore, honey in tsuras drakon lo. It's only these items that were not allowed to make the celestial bodies. Making a dragon is not a problem. So Ella pshita b'motze. Okay, so therefore, the dragon, the problem is finding a utensil with a dragon on it, because then it could have been worshipped. So, ukeditznan, just like our Mishnah says, hamotzi kelim v'aleim tzuras chama, that if you find a utensil and it has the picture of the sun, it has the embossed sun on it, reisha so then etc. And then also the dragon I'm not allowed to find either. Now, the way that we just explained this brisa is very difficult. We just explained the brisa to say that Reisha v'Seifa b'motze, that the beginning of the brisa, which talked about the sun and the moon, if you find one, right, that you can't find them. And the dragon you can't find. Umetsiasa, but the middle part, which talked about a human being, that's be'osa. That's only, you can't make one, right? So if you have, Barbie, right? You don't have to rip Barbie's nose off, right? It's as long as it's right now. These are the stories we hear about from. Now, if you hear these stories from our elders, right? That this is my wife has a story of her grandfather who actually did, in fact, great grandfather. This was not uncommon, right? This issue of breaking dolls that had faces, right? Because you did not want to have a human face. It would seem from this Gemara, the prohibition is making that face, not the existence of the face, right? So therefore, but we are like Chucky, yeah, could be, okay, can't have that one. So now, Amar Abaye, so Abaye explains yes, that's exactly how, it's a difficult brisa. We're just going to have to accept that. The brisa starts off talking about one thing, switches topics to something else, and then goes back to talking about the first topic again. Reisha v'Seifa b'motze. The first case and the last case, which talk about the sun, the moon, and the dragon, are talking about things you can't find. You have to destroy them if you find them. But mitziyasa, the middle case about a human face, so that's be'osa, that's only if you make it is the problem, not if you find it. So Rava disagrees. Rava says, kula b'motze. It's all dealing with finding it in any event. And umetziasa, the middle part is Rabbi Yehuda. It follows Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Tanya, we learned Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Yehuda Mosif. Rabbi Yehuda adds on and says, you know what other thing you cannot have a three-dimensional object of that you find? Demus menika visar afim. You can't have a nursing woman on your utensil that you buy, or the sarafis. Now, the sarafis is the name of an idolatry. It was actually put together, the sarafis, but this is called sarafis. They would pronounce it that way because it's tradition, and we will see when you don't use the name of the actual Avodah Zara. We make fun of the names, right? We use say Yashka, right, when we just refer to that guy, right? We don't use they don't use the actual respectful name for him. And this is also Sar Afis means the officer of zero. So this god called the Saraphis, they twisted his name so it came out that he's the officer of zero. So the Menika, why is the nursing woman to be something that is significant? Was that a worshipped image? Al Shem Chava, Shemenika Kolom Kulo, because they were worshiping Chava. Chava was the one who gave birth to the whole world. And so here this nursing woman was representing Chava, who was nursing all of the world. So they were worshiping her. That's not allowed. You can't worship Chava or a statue of Chava. Therefore, you have to destroy it. Sarafis, what's the Sarafis? Al Shem Yosef. They were worshiping Yosef. And Shasar Umephis Eskol Ha'ulam Kulo, because he was the officer in Egypt who calmed down the whole world. He everybody was all worried and nervous that there's going to be a big famine. And he said, don't worry, I'll take care of it. So everybody calmed down. The hu denakit griva, the kakayil, the he denakta bain the kamenika, right? He's the one who he got, this only applies when the sarafis is holding a measuring cup and he's in the process of measuring, because that's what he's doing. He's distributing food to everybody in the world. And she has to be holding a nursing baby, right? That's the depiction. If you find, right, they've got a picture of a woman, that's not an issue, right? Barbie's not an issue. But if you found nursing Barbie, then and they were worshiping it potentially as Chava, right? Then that would be a challenge. Okay, Tana Rabbana, a rabbi's word. Ezu Tzuris Drakon. What is a picture of Drakon? What is that? So Pirish Reb Shimon ben Elazar says, Kol sheyesh lo tzitzin bein prakov. It's got to have scales by between its ribs. It says its ribs. But Pirkov is between its knuckles, really. A perik is a knuckle. So it could also refer to vertebrae. Because I was trying to figure out what this would look like. And I think that it refers to like Godzilla, right? Kind of those spiky things on the back of Godzilla. I think that's what we're talking about. These dragons had sort of these spiky backs on them. That's what the image that they were worshiping. That's my interpretation. So Machvi Rav Asi ben Pirkei Tzover, and that's what Rav Asi showed him. He showed him between the bones of the neck, right? There's no ribs on your neck, right? So the bones on your neck showed him that here you got these knuckles here on your neck. That's where these scales would be. Amar of Chama, Rabbi Chanina, halach Reb Shimon Elazar, halach is like Reb Shimon Elazar, that if you have a dragon like the Chinese dragons, it's not an issue, right? The Chinese dragons are not a problem, right? Those were good luck symbols, but not necessarily worshipped symbols. I don't know if maybe they did in their culture. I don't think they were worshipped, but they those dragons are fine, right? But it's only the dragons that have spiky backs that you have to worry about. Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Bar Chana says the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Pamachas Chaynisi Mahalech Achar Rabbi Elazar HaKafar Beribi Bederech. One time I was going after Rabbi Elazar HaKafar Beribi on the way. Umatza Sham Tabas, and I found a ring. Ve'aleh Tzuras Drakon, and I found on the ring it had a picture of a drakon on it. Umatza Ove Kochavim Katan. So he wanted the ring. Seemed very valuable, but he couldn't take it because it's Avodah Zara, because it's got a drakon on it. So what did he need to do? He needed to nullify it. So he went and he was looking around for a non-Jewish idol worship guy and say, hey, could you nullify this? So he found a child. Velo Amar Lo Klum. He skipped the child. He didn't ask the child anything. Matzah Ove Kochavim Godel. He found an older non-Jew. Ve'amar Lo Betelin. He said it's nullified. Velo Bat Lo. And he didn't. He refused. The non-Jew refused to nullify it. So Sotru, so he kicked him, right? He said, nullify it. I told you to nullify it. And Ubatla. So then the non-Jew did, then he nullified it. So Shmami Natlas, hang on, Yuda. We're gonna learn three things from this. Shmami na, number one, the first thing that we're going to learn from this. Number one, a non-Jew can nullify idolatry, not only his, but any idolatry. A ring he finds on the street. You can get any non-Jew to nullify it. Shmami number two, Yodeya betiv shel avodas kochavim umishamsheha mevatel. In order for a person to be able to nullify that avodah zara, he has to be aware of what the avodah zara is, right? You can't go to a child and get your child to nullify it because the kid doesn't know anything about it. So therefore, you had to go to somebody who knew about avodah zara. And v'she'eno yodea betiv avodas kochavim misham she'eno mevatel. You can't go to somebody random and who is not an oved avodah zara and get him to nullify it. Ushma mina. And the third thing is oved kochavim mevatel bal korcho. You can force a non-Jew to nullify it, right? Because the guy got kicked. He didn't want to nullify it, but you can force him to do it. Even if he does it under duress, it still works. Yes, Yehuda.
But if you're taking the ring, which has the Avodah Zara on it, to a non-Jew to nullify it, isn't it like you're doing business with the non-Jew? Which we learned before we're not allowed to do business with the non-Jew.
You're not doing well. First of all, you're allowed to do business with non-Jews. There's only certain times you can't do business with non-Jews, right? Number two, he's not really doing business, right? He's just nullifying the idolatry. But yeah, the short answer is you're allowed to do business with non-Jews. Okay. So now, Migadif bo Rabbi Chanina. So Rabbi Chanina said he Megadif, he blasphemed it. He said this is not the right answer. What you just deduced is not correct. V'leislei Rabbi Elazar hakafar b'Ribbi. Haditnan doesn't Rabbi Elazar hakafar b'Ribbi doesn't learn what we learned in this Mishnah. Hamatzo mina ari mina dova mina namer umina gayis umina nahar. Well, going through all these things too fast, right? If a person saves idolatry from a lion, from a bear, from a leopard, from a gaius is a not sure what a gaius
It
is.
says here from a troop. I don't know what a troop
Oh,
is.
yeah. A soldier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, so he's saving his friend's money, right, from any of these people, right? These people come in and they're trying to take his possession, right? Umina nahar, or from a river, umizuto shel yam, or from the edge of the sea, umishluliso shel nahar, or from being swept away by the debris of the river, right? When it's overflowing. V'hamotzi b'srati uplati, or he finds it in a public place, in a public square or on a highway. Gedola, in a large place. Ubechol mokum sharab mitzuyim sham, any place where there's a public location. Hareu shalo, right? So then he can keep those items. Those are items that you're allowed to, you can keep them. Why? Mipnei shabala misyashem mehem, because any of those circumstances, the owner gives up hope. He's not getting them back from any of these places. So Amar Abaye, so Abaye says, now, nehida mino miyayish, misura mi miyayish. Now, why is that? I understand that if this item is an avodah zara item, right? So that means that when the owner, he gives up hope. So he gives up hope that he'll find his object again. But that giving up hope doesn't nullify it from idolatry, right? Meimar Omar, maybe he'll surely say, he says, look, I lost my avodah zara, I lost my ring, it's avodah zara. So this is his point, is he's like, I don't understand. If the ring gets lost, doesn't the person who lost it give up hope? You can keep it because the guy who gave up hope nullified it. We don't need to go find somebody else and nullify it. The answer is yes, you do. Because when the guy loses it, he gives up hope of him finding it again. However, Miflach, he says, in his mind, fine, I lost my idol. Whoever finds it, that guy can worship it. So he's not giving up hope on it being an idol. He's not nullifying it from being an idol, right? So whoever is, if a non-Jew is going to find it, miflach palcha, he can worship it. If a Jew finds it, ID didameho yikarin mizavin lolovikom, since it's a valuable item, he'll sell it to a non-Jew, upalachla, and the non-Jew will worship it. So therefore, either way, it's going to get worshipped again. So therefore, just because a person loses it doesn't mean that it's nullified. And that explains why they had to go find another non-Jew to nullify it, despite the fact that it was a lost item. Tanan Hasam, we learned in a Mishnah over there. Demus tsuras levonos, hayu l'Rabbi Gamliel ba'aliyaso betavla bekosel shebahen mares hahedyotos. V'omer len kazerisem o kazerisem. Rabbi Gamliel had in his upper chamber, he had diagrams, pictures of the moon. And what would happen is when people would come in to testify about Rosh Chodesh, he would show them and say, hey, did you see this? Did you see this? Did you see that? So now, problem is, Shari, why was he allowed to have those? Right? To moon. So, V'aksiv, Pasuk says, Lo sasun iti, lo sasun kidmus shamshim mishamshim lefanai. You can't make depictions of the celestial bodies that serve me. So therefore, making an image of the moon is prohibited. How did Rabbi Gamliel make these images to show people? So Rabbi says, Lo asra Torah ela shemoshin she'efshalosos kamosom. He said, the only prohibited celestial bodies are those that you can make a 100% replica of. You can't make a replica of the moon. It's way too large, right? So therefore, according to this opinion, making a three-dimensional moon is not a problem because it's clearly not the moon, right? It's not a representation of the moon. You know what things you can't do? You can't make a house that looks like the heichal of the Beis Hamikdash, right? Can't make like a museum to the Beis Hamikdash museum and make here's our pretend Beis Hamikdash. Achsadra tavnis ulam, or make a porch on your house that looks like the antechamber of the Beis Hamikdash. But so you can't make your outside your yard tavnis azara like the look like the azara of the Beis Hamikdash, right? Shulchan, otherwise every shul would do it, right? Shulchan tavnis shulchan. You can't make a table that is a imitation of the table that they used in the Beis Hamikdash. Menorah, you can't make a menorah tavnis menorah, which looks like the menorah. Aval hu osa shel hey v'shel vav. You can make a menorah that has 5 branches. You can make one that has 6 branches. V'shel ches, you can make one that has 8 branches. V'shel zayin lo yaseh, but you cannot make one that has 7 branches. Often you will see in shuls, they're trying to make ones that look very close. And what they will do is they'll make with 6 branches, and the middle will be a Jewish star or something, so that it doesn't have a 7th light in the middle, because then that's not a branch, right? But this is the reason why you can't make a replica of the utensils. Now we know the Museum of the Holy Land in Eretz Yisrael, and they're doing exactly this. The answer is they're not doing exactly this. They are, in their opinion, making the actual utensils that will be used in the third Beis Hamikdash. They're not making replicas. They're making the real deal. So therefore, that's why they don't have a problem with it. I remember when they were starting this stuff, people had a problem with it. So, and I guess when time goes on, I guess people just say, what's the big deal? So the answer is afilu, and by the way, making this menorah is afilu shel shar mini matachos. Even if you're not making out of gold, even if you're making out of other metals. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, af shel eitz lo yaseh. You can't even make it out of wood. Why? Because the menorah could have been made out of wood, and they did make it out of wood at one point, right? Kederach also b'nei beis chashmonai. The Chashmonaim, when they came to re-sanctify the Beis Hamikdash and wanted to light the menorah, they couldn't find a menorah, right? They all got destroyed, and they needed oil. They didn't have oil. We know about the miracle of the oil. They didn't have a menorah either. So what they do? They put one together out of wood. Amrulo misham raya. He says that wasn't what they did. That's not a proof. He says, after all, shipudin shel parzel hayu. What they did is they took metal poles. They had iron poles, and that's what they used. The chofin babaitz. They stuck them in the ground, and they just made them like that, and that was their menorah. He'eshiru, they got wealthier, right? They started a kingdom. They got a little wealthier, collected some tax. Asa shel kesef, they made the menorahs out of silver. Chazru v'heshiru, they got a little bit richer. Asum shel zahav, then they made them out of gold. V'shamashim she'i efshar lasos kamosan. So therefore, the moon is fine. because you can't. It's not doesn't fall into the category. We'll just finish this up and we'll finish for today, right? But shamoshim she'iev shalasos kamosan mishari. But those items which are not able to be replicated, like the moon, you're suggesting they are permitted to be made. Well, that's not true. V'atanya, we learn in a brisa, lo sasun liti, you're not allowed to make things like me, lo sasun kidmus shemashai shameshamshim lifanai b'marim. You're not allowed to make the celestial bodies which serve before me. And so therefore that includes the sun and the moon. That's brisa. So Abaye. So Abaye explains, lo asra Torah ela bidmus dalid panim bahade hadodi. So he says that Abaye explains that this Mishnah is telling us that the making an image of a face is only prohibited if you're imitating the images of an angel, a celestial body. And angels have four faces. Angels have a face that on one side that's a ox, an angel on one side that has a face of an eagle on another, a human face on the other, and a lion's face on the other. So you have all four of those faces. So you can't make a statue that has all four faces, right? Elameata, well, if that's the case, pirtuf adam luchudei tishtari. So then that means that making a human face should be permissible because it's not all four faces. Allah Matanya, why do we have a brisa that says kol partzufos mutar and chutz pirtuf adam? The brisa that we had read earlier said that you're not allowed to make a human face, right? You can make anything except a human face. Some Rav Yehuda, braid Rav Yeshua, mi perkei de Rav Yeshua, shmieli, from the teachings of Rav Yeshua, I had learned lo sasiniti lo sasin osi aval sha'ar shemoshim shori. He says that you're not allowed to make images of me, right? Which is the images of human beings are made in the image of Hashem, right? But other images you're allowed to make, Ushar Shemashim Mishari, but the other servants of Hashem are you allowed to make? Vatanya, we're in a brisa there. Lo sasiniti lo sasin kedmusham shayim shamshim lufanim b'maram kegon ofanim usrafim v'chayas hakodesh. This brisa says you're not allowed to even make pictures of any angels, that the srafim, the ofanim, and the chayos hakodesh. These are all types of angels, and I don't know what their faces look like, but you're not allowed to make images of them. Umalachei shares and the ministering angels. So Rabbi says, Lo asra Torah ella shamashim shebemador ha'elyon v'shebemador. So he says that Abaye says, well, according to that brisa, only the spiritual elevated planes, which are beyond the visible heavens that we have, you can't make pictures of them. So you can't make the angels, you can't make all of the celestial beings, but v'shebemador ha'tachton mishari. Are you suggesting that the ones, the celestial bodies, the sun and the moon are permissible? V'atanya, we have a brisa for that. Asher b'shamayim l'rabos chamal levana kochav mazobos mimal l'rabos malach yesharis. It's both. You can't make any images of the heavenly bodies up above and the heavenly bodies that are in the secondary level, the planets as well. So the answer is Kitanyahi le'ov. So, well, you know what? And we're going to keep on going for a while. So why don't we stop here? We'll continue this on for next time on Sunday morning, Yamir Hashem.
Sunday morning is Tisha B'Av. Remember,
Sunday
Rabbi?
morning is Tisha B'Av, so we're not doing it. Next class is Monday evening.
Monday evening. Okay, I guess. Okay, that sounds good. We'll have a little work cut out for us next week, but that's fine.
Correct. We're gonna have
how about Sunday night after tomorrow?
Oh,
Sunday
I
night
don't know about that. Yeah. That's no. Rabbi Loiterman, I had one question. Like, can we go back just for this is a quick one regarding like the prohibition of like making a replica of the menorah? So in many shuls, including ours, we have a 6-branched menorah that sits on our amud, right by the amud. Is it? I always wonder, like, what's the story with the 6th branch? Is that because of this, or is this like something different?
No, 6-branch menorahs in every shul. You'll see the 6-branch menorah is because of this. Because they want to not make a 7-branch one.
Gotcha. Okay, beautiful.
Exactly. I got a question also, Rabbi. Just back to the ring that was found with the inscription that's Avodah Zara, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if we go back, we said that if an idol was broken by the idol worshiper,
yes,
you can still not use it, as opposed to
if it was broken by the idol worshiper, you can.
You can.
If it was broken by itself, you couldn't. According to Rabbi.
Oh, I see. Okay, fine. So then, because I was wondering why you could take the ring to
an idol worshiper.
Non-Jew. Yeah. and nullify it. Okay.
Great. I think that a non-Jew should have that business, right? Non-Jew, I will nullify the idolatry from any of your items and make a humrah, and you should stamp it. You can get like in Lakewood, there's got to be some non-Jew there in Lakewood.
No, like
he also turns on enough lights on Shabbos, things that we need.
With the AK logo on it.
That's correct. You get a logo coming with a certified non-Avodah Zara.
They haven't thought of that idea because they're not Jewish.
That's exactly right.
Exactly. He needs a Jewish partner to give him the idea.
We're going to continue from Rabbi Yehuda.
I'll probably run through the back and forth a little bit just to be able to make sure we run.
There's a technical term for it.
What's that, Ellie?
The technical term is muksagoy.
There you go. The Shabbos way, right?
Sure.
Shabbos. And if they're going into doing that to churches and combining with real estate, you could make money.
There you go.
For sure. All right, gentlemen. All right, Rabbi Loiterman, have a good Shabbos and an easy fast.
We'll get you with you on Monday.
Monday night.
On Monday, and we'll be catching up a little bit.
Amazing.